Hello friends, this is Grief speaking. Today we're diving back into 100 ghost stories that will lead to my own death. We did the first 75 already, and if you missed those videos, no sweat. This is an anthology series, and so every ghost story stands on its own. This is 100 ghost stories that will lead to my own death, part 4. Story 76, the Sanu River. Yuma hangs his head in defeat and says that they failed. Kido didn't bring the doll with him, and so they couldn't steal it. This is painfully clear as Hina lays on Yuma's bed, still covered in the bruises. Looking riddled with guilt, Yuma begins the next story. A young man named Takumi wakes up on a rocky shore to see his grandmother holding him. The last thing he remembers is his father beating him, and he's confused to see his grandmother, who died of an illness 8 years ago. Her death hit him particularly hard because she was very kind to him, and together they confided with each other about his violent parents. His grandmother apologizes for leaving him all alone to face them, but she does confirm that she's dead. Takumi is still alive, however, and this river is the final stretch before death. There's a choice to be made though. Takumi could refuse to cross the river and instead continue through the forest ahead, which would bring him back to life. His grandma traveled here to help him make the right decision. Surprisingly, Takumi decides that dying may not be that bad, as living has only caused him suffering. Plus, at least his grandma is here, and he wouldn't have to be alone anymore. So the two get on a boat and start rowing down the river. Seeing how much bigger and stronger Takumi has gotten, his grandma asks why he hasn't stood up to his father. She moves his hair to the side, and we can see a pretty big gash where his father struck him, and then she shows a similar wound on her own head. This is a shock to Takumi as he realizes that his father lied about how his grandmother died. In reality, he beat her to death just like him. This lights a fire under Takumi, and just as they nearly reach the final shores of death, he turns the boat around, insisting there's something he needs to do. They get back to the forest, and Takumi heads off as his grandmother encourages him, presumably to kill his father and get revenge for them both. As the story ends, Kido shows up covered in bruises. Yuma tells him he needs to make another doll, but Kido says that would take too much time, and he reaches out to grab Hina. This isn't to harm her, but instead to heal her. Kido seems to take on the bruises from Hina, which spread onto his own body. Story 77, Parade of Ants. Yuma's face is soaked with tears, and he says he's done something that can't be undone. He tries to convince himself that Kido will be fine, and then continues with the next story. A boy is mercilessly smashing ants under his shoe in the grass outside when he's interrupted by his mother, who says it's time to head home. He scrapes the dead ants off his shoes and runs off with his mom. When they get home, the kid notices his shoes still have ants on them and brushes them off. Later, while watching TV, he sees a black speck on the screen, and upon further investigation, it turns out to be another ant, and the kid just smushes it with his finger. When he sits down for dinner, he's startled by an ant crawling on his plate. He tries to wipe it away, but soon the food on his plate is swarming with the things. In a panic, he calls for his mother, but she doesn't see anything. His food is perfectly fine and untouched. Reluctantly, he takes a bite and immediately breaks into a sweat. Gagging, he opens his mouth and ants come flooding out, wriggling on his tongue. The kid runs to the bathroom to rinse his mouth out, and when he leaves, he sees thousands of ants scuttering down the hall. They climb up the boy's legs and cover his body, biting him. He screams in pain and lifts up his sleeve to reveal a large hole in his arm that the ants are crawling in and out of. It seems they've found a new place to start a colony. After the story, Hina comes into the room smiling, and she doesn't have any of the bruises. She tells Yuma she's all better now and wants to thank Kido for saving her. Yuma tells her that Kido is too far gone. He had to become the substitute doll himself in order to save her. As Yuma trembles and cries, Hina grabs him and asks if Kido is still alive. Story 78. Pig daughter. Yuma is on the computer in his room and seems relieved after checking the news. He then starts on the next story. A married couple is traveling home from their daughter's funeral when the father suddenly stops and runs off into the woods. Still shaken from her daughter's death, his wife continues home to mourn, and later that evening, her husband returns holding a pig in his arms. Taken aback, the woman asks why on earth he has a pig and is even more shocked by his answer. He believes that this is their daughter, Anna. He says that the reason he ran off was he heard Anna's voice calling to him when he found this wild pig. Pulling back the pig's ear, he shows 3 little birthmarks exactly like their daughter had. This is all the evidence he needs to be convinced that this is Anna. The pig then runs up to the woman and she slaps the shit out of it to keep it away. She's pretty pissed at her husband's insanity and tells him to take the pig back where he got it. He just cries tears of joy and hugs the pig, saying that they can be a family again now. That night, the wife stares at a picture of Anna when she hears some disgusting noises coming from the dining room. She walks in to see her husband feeding the pig ice cream on the kitchen table. It's revolting, and the pig breaks the bowl it's eating out of in the process. The wife is livid, as the bowl that broke was made by their daughter, and the pig runs off down the hallway. The husband just laughs and says, "Look, she even remembers where her room is." And it is a little weird. The pig jumps up and seems to pull the handle on the door to the daughter's room and goes inside. Following behind, the wife enters the room and is immediately hit with a terrible stench. The next panel is one of the more disgusting in this whole series. It's a detailed close-up of the pig standing on the daughter's bed and projectile shitting all over it. I don't know why that was necessary. Well, anyway, the beast starts rolling around in its own filth as the woman watches in horror. This pig has tainted everything she loves: her husband, her daughter, and her memories of both of them. As she laments the current state of affairs, the pig does something pretty strange. It sits at the daughter's desk and picks up a crayon. The mother rushes over to scold the beast for messing up more of her daughter's things, but is stunned to see that the pig has drawn something. A clear depiction of two happy parents and their young daughter. Maybe this really is Anna reincarnated. A pretty interesting twist, but that's not the end of the story. The next day, the husband is desperately looking for Anna, and his wife says, "Never mind that, today we're having a feast." On the final page, it's clear that she has slaughtered the pig and made all kinds of pork-based dishes out of it. Pretty fucked up considering there was clear evidence that this was actually her daughter. After the story, Yuma returns to his computer and his fears have come to fruition as he sees a news article concerning a local detective. Apparently, the officer died in his home under suspicious circumstances and covered in bruises. Yuma falls to the floor in shock, realizing that Kido really is dead. Story 79, Pinky Promise. Hina walks in and straight up asks Yuma what's going on in his room, but he just ignores her and starts the next story. 4 kids play at the park: Ichijo, Ninomiya, and Mikami. The 4th kid is a pretty disturbed looking boy named Rejima. He asks if they'll all be friends forever. He's had a hard time making friends because he moves a lot, and asks if they'll pinky promise that they'll always hang out together. The other kids happily go along with it, and they all lock pinkies, chanting a common real world phrase: "Pinky promise, 10,000 punches. If I lie, 1,000 needles down the hatch." Or something like that. Despite the promise, as time went on, the boys slowly stopped inviting Rejima to hang out, and soon they forgot about him altogether. Now adults, Ichijo gets a text from Mikami to meet him at the park as soon as possible. When he arrives, he finds Mikami is heavily bandaged and missing his pinky finger. He tells Ichijo that it was Rejima. He showed up out of nowhere and sliced it off. As they discuss the incident, Ichijo gets a text from the other friend, Ninomiya, who simply gives him a hospital room number. Ichijo rushes to the hospital and finds the room. He says that Rejima beat him mercilessly over and over again. It seems Rejima is out for revenge, and Ninomiya thinks the acts of violence are tied to the pinky promise they made all those years ago. First, he cut off Mikami's pinky. Then, on Ninomiya, he enacted the 10,000 punches, or at least it felt like that. And now, Ichijo is the next target to be punished. Ninomiya says the only way out of it might be for them to fulfill their promise and hang out with Rejima like old times. But Ichijo says no way, they were only friends with him because they felt sorry for him. Rejima's an ungrateful piece of shit. Ichijo starts to call the police but drops his phone by accident. When he leans down, he finds something disturbing. Ninomiya's real body beaten and disfigured, laying dead under the hospital bed. If this is the real Ninomiya, then who was he just talking to? The man removes the bandages from his head to reveal that familiar disturbed face of Rejima. He stands up, clutching sharp objects in his hand, and closes in on Ichijo, reciting the final section of the pinky promise. If you're lying, it's 1,000 needles down the hatch. That wraps up the story, and Yuma leaves his room saying he needs to get some air. Hina is clearly worried about him and tries to think of a way to stop all this. She then looks at the object on Yuma's desk and seems to get an idea. Story 80, The Ultimate Rehabilitation. The next day, Yuma enters his room and tells Hina not to get too close to the object. She seems to be hiding something behind her back, and Yuma starts the next story. A reporter arrives at a famous juvenile rehabilitation center to take a tour for his newspaper. They take in the worst offenders who repeatedly commit crimes, and miraculously, there's a 0% recidivism rate for the young men who leave here, meaning no one who has gone through this facility has ever committed another crime. They pass by some of the boys exercising outside who have huge smiles. It's kind of creepy actually. The reporter starts to snap some photos, and the tour guide immediately jumps in the way of his camera. Now that we get a closer look, she's also got a creepy ass smile. As they enter the facility, the guide says something rather ominous in passing about how the new arrivals receive rehabilitation. This confuses the reporter, who wonders what she means by receiving rehab, as if it's an act done to them rather than a process of correction. She turns around and says, "Gosh, Sakurai, you already know what it means." This sends a shiver down the man's spine, and it's worth noting that he never said his name was Sakurai, only that he was a reporter. She continues the tour and says that after they're rehabilitated, they make sure the boys acclimate well to the lifestyles that the facility has chosen for them. The guide turns around and sees that Sakurai is gone. He snuck off to try and investigate what's really going on here. He eventually comes upon a room that says rehabilitation in progress and takes a peek inside. There seem to be doctors doing some kind of brain surgery on one of the arrivals. Apparently, they are essentially remaking the young criminal, starting from the brain, saying it's the only way they can save him and return this world to how it was meant to be. Just then, the tour guide shows up and reminds Sakurai that trespassing is a crime. He pushes past her and runs, but soon the alarms sound off and security fans out to find him. Sakurai tries to process what he discovered as he makes his way outside. He looks over to see some of the boys playing baseball, and one of their hats falls off, revealing a massive scar and stitches all around their head. This confirms that the rehab going on here is really just brain surgery. Sakurai starts jumping the fence to leave, and his inner monologue starts shifting from plans to escape to the repeated thought not to tell anyone what he saw here. On the final panel, we see that Sakurai is actually having brain surgery done on him, and with a huge smile, he repeats that he won't say a word to anyone. It seems that Sakurai was actually a young criminal who's been put into this facility, but I have two thoughts on exactly what's happening. Either the entire thing was in Sakurai's head to begin with as he undergoes the surgery, or the whole thing was real and what we're seeing is after Sakurai has been caught. I actually think the latter makes the most sense, as the tour guide mentions how they place the rehabilitated criminals into assigned roles after they leave. Maybe Sakurai is meant to be a reporter when he leaves, and this scenario was part of the testing to see if he would be able to play the role. It's not entirely clear, but it's a cool story, and it reminds me a lot of Clockwork Orange. Yuma finishes the story and just walks out of the room without a word. Hina takes this as an opportunity to act. She pulls out a lighter and runs up to the object, lighting it on fire. Considering this object is our window into Yuma's room, the panels themselves start burning up, and we see Hina crying until finally we're just looking at a blank page. I'm sure at this point you guys have probably guessed what the object is on Yuma's desk, but I won't reveal it until the story does. We do know now that it was highly flammable, and it burned up in the manner of a small piece of paper or photo. Story 81, The Wife Who Couldn't Return. Surprisingly, we still see Yuma standing over the ashes on his desk and putting something new down. He apologizes, saying he wasn't watching close enough, but he's glad that he had a spare. Then he begins the next story. A man named Ko gets a call from his wife Minami, who's on her way home. During the call, he suddenly hears a terrible crash and the line goes dead. This was the last conversation he ever had with Minami. While crossing the street, she was killed by a speeding car. Apparently, it was pretty brutal, dragging her body along the pavement for quite a while before finally stopping. As Ko kneels in remembrance, his phone starts buzzing, and he's thrown off to see that it's his wife calling. He doesn't know how this could be real, but reluctantly answers, and to his surprise, he hears Minami's voice saying that she's nearly home, just like she said in that original call moments before she died. Once again, there's a sickening crash, and Ko throws the phone to the ground. After this, he starts getting the same phone call from his dead wife every day, and every time she says she's nearly home before she's run over again. He can't stand the thought of Minami being forced to relive her death over and over. She calls again, and this time he immediately tells her to stop and not to cross the street. She lets out a small yell and tells him that she was almost hit by a car, but she's fine and she'll be home soon. Does this mean that he saved her? Is she really gonna come home like nothing ever happened? Well, soon there's a knock on the door, and Minami says she forgot her key, asking if Ko could open the door for her. He looks over and sees the memorial photo of her, reminding himself that she definitely died that day. But either way, he walks to the door and looks through the peephole. On the other side is his wife's horribly disfigured body looking back at him and yelling not to ignore her. Yuma ends the story and wonders why Hina would do something so terrible. At that moment, something really weird happens. The next panel is from a totally different perspective, as if someone is peeking in at Yuma from the hall. It really threw me off because it's never shifted point of view in the Yuma segments until now. Anyway, it shifts back and we see Hina enter the room. I guess we were seeing out of her eyes. Weird. Story 82, Ghost Pipes. Hima apologizes profusely for what she did to Yuma's most prized possession, and he forgives her, saying nothing came of it in the end. As an apology, Hina says that she'll tell today's story. It starts with the description of Monotropastrum humili, white flowers that grow under the shade of trees. Because of their appearance, they're often called ghost pipes, and some people believe that they grow above corpses. We see a kid named Masa looking up ghost pipes in a flower guide, and suspecting their nectar may be sweet, he picks one up and sucks on it. Well, his intuition was right, and the ghost pipe tastes amazing. He then spots a friend from class, Yota, and wonders what he's doing in this corner of the park. Yota says he was actually visiting his dog's grave, which just so happens to be right under the ghost pipes. Masa apologizes and jumps off the spot, and then insists that Yota try sucking on the ghost pipe. Yota is a little weirded out by a strange boy in the woods telling him to suck his pipe, but he eventually gives in, and just like Masa, he can't believe how good it is. The boys can't get enough and go on sucking the nectar from all the ghost pipes nearby until they finally run out. After this, Masa and Yota meet up every day after school to search for more ghost pipes, but they haven't had any luck finding any. Masa is so obsessed with the flavor that he stops eating other foods altogether. Compared to the ghost pipes, nothing really tastes right. After days of searching, the boys finally find a patch of the flower, and Masa doesn't hesitate to start slurping down the nectar from any that he can get his hands on. Yota stops him and points out that the ghost pipes are actually growing out of a skeleton. It looks like someone died here. It freaks them out for a minute, but it's not long before the craving takes over Masa and he continues to eat more, ignoring the fact that they're growing out of someone's corpse. Soon, Yota joins in too, stuffing multiple flowers in his mouth at once. Masa tells him to slow down and save some for him, but Yota ignores him and shovels more and more flowers into his mouth. Realizing they'll run out soon, Masa's famine mentality kicks in and he clutches a sharp stick in his hand. Days later, we see Masa in his back garden behind the shed, sucking down ghost pipes, which have grown out of a mound of dirt. It looks like Masa made his own batch using his friend's corpse. Now that's messed up. Hina finishes the story and something's off. Her eyes are black, and Yuma points out that that didn't sound like a typical Hina story. She turns to face him, well, her body does at least. Her head twists completely backwards like The Exorcist. It suddenly snaps forward and she seems to come back to normal and apologizes for not starting the story yet. Yuma is freaked out and tells her that she already told it. Story 83, Leather Bag. Hina sits on Yuma's bed and says that she feels like her memories are fading. She then falls asleep and Yuma starts the next story. It begins with a sales associate at a bag shop asking if a man wants to purchase a bag, but she says they only make sales to those who can honor the agreement. She holds up some instructions that tell the proper way to care for your bag. 1. Gently wipe away any dirt or debris. 2. Spray a generous amount of the special formula on the bag and leave it to soak. And 3. Rub protective cream over the bag for it to absorb. These are to be followed 3 times a day. The man agrees to follow the instructions and takes home his new bag. He applies the formula and rubs it down. It's kind of creepy how into it he is. Later, he looks at himself in the mirror holding the bag and thinks he's cool shit. He declares that he has to be someone who can live up to the bag. At lunch, he starts his routine of wiping it down and starts talking to it. One of his coworkers roasts him pretty severely, and the poor guy runs off. His coworker sees the special formula on his desk and says that he'll dispose of it as it's not work related. Later, the man desperately searches for it as the bag is way overdue for a rub down. Speaking of which, the bag is not looking great. The leather is all cracked and red with huge blemishes covering it. The man returns to the store and tells the lady what happened, showing her the bag, which looks even worse at this point. She starts trying to repair it, and he's curious about the special lotion he uses. It seems like it should be used for humans. The lady then casually tells him that the bags are made from human skin. It's the only thing that can produce such a great texture. She says that possessing such a high quality product can also improve the quality of the owner. She finishes applying more formula to the bag and then gives it back to the man. Learning that his bag was made from human skin, he's a little weirded out, but it jumps ahead to the future. The mean coworker from earlier is apologizing profusely to his boss about a contract he couldn't secure, and it's revealed that his boss is actually the man with the bag. It seems that he has been living up to its quality. Well, that was a weird one. As the story ends, Yuma goes over to check on Hina, and once again the point of view changes to Hina's perspective. She reaches out her hand and tousles Yuma's hair. Story 84, A Life of Beauty. Yuma says that Hina is late and maybe she can't make it today. Then he proceeds with the next story. A woman named Futaba talks about how beautiful her mother is. Despite being in her 50s, her mom looks like she's much younger. She asks Futaba if she can watch the younger kids while she's out for the day, and this seems like a pretty typical thing. In fact, Futaba looks kinda weathered considering she's only 30. She has the younger kids say good morning to a picture of their oldest sibling, Ichika, who is actually dead. Once Ichika died, Futaba was the next oldest and began taking care of all the chores and watching the children. The third oldest, Mina, refuses to help out and wants to enjoy her life as a 20-year-old. She coldly tells Futaba that doing chores all day is probably what's made her look so old. Later, Futaba finds a card for a beauty salon in her mother's coat pocket. No wonder she looks so good for her age. She's been hitting up the salon all the time. Futaba decides maybe she should try this herself and heads to the same salon. An employee hooks her up to a machine and asks how many years she'd like to restore her youth by. It's an odd way to phrase it, but Futaba says 5 years if possible. The strange employee smiles and says, well, that'll be 10 years off your lifespan. She says that in order to make her younger, they'll need to take 5 years from her life, and the other 5 is compensation for the service. Before Futaba can question the whole thing, she's put to sleep and the operation begins. When she wakes up, she looks great and is literally 5 years younger. When she picks up the kids from daycare, one of the employees is struck by her beauty and asks her out. This puts a big pep in her step, and Futaba decides to go back to the salon to get even younger. She's happy to give up another 10 years in order to gain back all the youth that she lost raising the kids. The employee frowns, however, and informs her that she doesn't have enough lifespan to give. The remaining years of her life have already been used up by her mother. So I guess they're able to take the lifespan off of your kids as well, which is pretty messed up. It means Futaba's mother not only used up her lifespan, but it implies she did the same to her eldest daughter who died previously. Even more disturbing, it kind of seems like the reason she has all these kids to begin with is as a constant source of lifespan for her to steal, which must be why at 50 she's still cranking them out. Yuma finishes the story and goes to bed, and later that night someone comes creeping down the hall and into his room. It's Hina, and her eyes are blacked out again. Even more surprising, she's walking upside down on the ceiling. Story 85, Being Held. Yuma says that Hina hasn't shown up today either, and starts on the next story. A girl spots her crush Seino sitting on a bench at the train station. This is pretty surprising because Seino died last week after jumping in front of a train. She recounts how he was always sick and was forced to sit out at gym class. So she often saw him sitting and staring and felt a connection to him as another outsider. She feels like if she ever worked up the courage to talk to him, maybe he wouldn't have offed himself. So now, seeing his ghost, she takes the opportunity to meet him officially. She tells him she understands what it must have been like for him and how if she had just spoken to him, maybe things would be different. Seino just turns his bloodshot eyes towards her. It's pretty unsettling, and she stands up feeling dumb. She apologizes to him and decides that she's just another one of his classmates that he hated. She starts to walk away when Seino's ghost finally speaks. He says that she's nothing like him and that he liked his classmates. That's why he tried his best to attend school despite his weak body. The morning he died, he actually fainted and fell on the tracks. It wasn't on purpose. He tells her not to act like she knows him by making up scenarios in her head. She breaks into tears and says she's sorry again. Seino then says he does have one regret. He wishes he could go to school one last time. The girl starts trying to help him off the bench and insists that he can come to school with her if he tries. He tells her his body can't make it there, and she grabs him by the arm and starts pulling, saying that he doesn't have to worry about his health anymore. He begs her to stop, but she just pulls harder and she yanks the dude's torso off. Yep, the train ripped him into pieces when he died, and they were only resting on top of each other on the bench. Seino starts screaming and grabbing at his legs. It's pretty sad. Well, I guess that's 2 times the girl made assumptions and was wrong. Yuma finishes up the story and rushes off to bed when the dark, menacing figure of his father shows up and looks like he's about to lay into Yuma as usual. He stops, however, when he hears something in the hall, and when he goes to look, we see Yuma's father get snatched up into the ceiling and disappear. Whoa. Story 86, Is Someone There? This chapter starts with Yuma telling his stepmom that he has no idea where his father is. He tells Hina he's sorry for all the fuss, but his dad hasn't come back since yesterday. He sits down and begins the next story. It starts with an ominous death. A woman found dead in her apartment with her mouth slashed open side to side like a Glasgow smile. How could anyone be so cruel? Well, we're about to find out as it jumps back 1 week prior. We see the woman talking with her friend when she sees an eye looking at her from the balcony. She freaks out and closes the shades tight. She apologizes for her behavior to her friend, but lately she's been feeling like someone's watching her. Her friend says that instead of closing the curtains, she should fully open them. That way she'd know for certain that something's there instead of being worried about what's lurking behind it. She even demonstrates by opening the curtains and saying, "See, now there's a 0% chance that anything's there." The girl's friend leaves, and later she imagines someone watching her from the closet. Taking her friend's advice, she opens the doors wide, proving that there was nothing inside. Next, she gets spooked by the curtains on her balcony window again and imagines someone hiding behind them. She takes a breath and pulls them open, and once again, there's nothing there but her reflection. On a closer look, she then sees an eye looking at her from inside the reflection of her own mouth. She screams and grabs a pair of scissors. Then, in the final panel, the girl horrifically slices her own mouth open where we can see the face of a person peeking out. It's a really disturbing image, but I guess she wanted to open her mouth up so that there would be a 0% chance of anything being inside. After the story, Hina says that she's been really sleepy lately, and whenever she falls asleep, she has vivid dreams. In them, she was watching Yuma's father until finally last night she dreamed that she killed him. Story 87, Civa Talk. There's loud banging and clatter throughout the house, and Yuma apologizes to Hina. It seems that this is his distraught stepmother's doing, as his father still hasn't come back. Yuma tells her not to worry about it and starts the next story. An old man enters a small room where there's a large booth labeled Civa Talk with rates by the minute posted nearby. It's his first time using the machine, which describes Civa Talk as an AI service that uses photographic data to recreate someone you can have a conversation with. The man feeds it 5,000 yen, which gives him 10 minutes of time, and he also gives it a photo of a beautiful young woman, his high school sweetheart. Suddenly, the photo comes to life, and it's as if the young woman is right in front of him in the booth. Her name is Namiko, and the old man is in shock. She recognizes him as Takeo, and the 10 minutes fly by as they relive their best moments together. Before the timer runs out, Namiko asks about Takeo's current life and looks disappointed to find out that he's married. He says that the romance has fizzled out from the marriage and his wife is only with him for his pension. He declares that Namiko is the only woman he's ever loved. Later, he arrives home and his wife is just watching TV. He asks about dinner, and the wrinkly old bag just makes a mean face and points to the table where there are a few stale Rice Crisps. Takeo then starts seeing Namiko every day after work, but one day he tells her he can't come back anymore as his wife has caught on to his spending habits and hid his money and checkbook from him. Tears well up in Namiko's eyes, and she says that it's probably for the best. Rather than someone who's gone, he should cherish the person he has by his side. Takeo gets home and does the opposite. He sneaks up on his wife and attempts to strangle her with a rope. But she catches onto him and he panics, running out of the house. She chases him all the way to the Civa Talk machine, where she finds him talking once again to Namiko, and she wonders why her husband is talking to her when she was younger. The old man freaks out, saying that it's not her, and in the final panel we hear a smashing sound. It's a great reveal. The old man wasn't talking to some other woman from his youth, but rather his wife from back when he first fell in love with her. It'd almost be sweet in another context, but here it's just sad as hell. The story ends and Hina tells Yuma that she's still having the dreams, and now she sees another person in them, his stepmom. Speak of the devil, Yuma's stepmom enters the room and yells at Hina to go home. Story 88, Let's Go to the Park. Yuma and Hina are discussing her dreams again, and she says that each dream she gets closer to his stepmom. As they talk, Hina passes out, and I guess Yuma's used to it by now as he just starts the next story. This one starts with an ominous dark panel of a creepy man saying, "Let's go to the park." It cuts to a man named Kenichi and his young son now walking past a park. The boy begs his father to let them play. Kenichi says he's sorry, but he has a severe phobia of slides, and that maybe now his mother can bring him later. In that typical child fashion of having no tact, the boy says, "Is it because Grandpa died falling down a slide?" And the kid is right. The reason Kenichi is afraid of slides is because his father fell off a slide and died while saving him from falling. Well, now just ignores his father's deep-seated trauma and runs into the park laughing. He climbs the slide and tells his father there's nothing to be scared of, but Kenichi is hit with terrifying flashbacks of his father, suggesting they go to the park. Every step he climbs in pursuit of his son, more memories come flooding back to him. We learn that in reality, this was no average park visit. Kenichi's drunken father woke him up in the middle of the night to take him. In a panel of the future and the past mirroring each other, we see Kenichi as a boy and his father sitting at the edge of the slide, while in the present, he now stands behind his son. In another flashback, Kenichi's father asks for a little push, and still a naive child, he does so with a smile. In a really terrifying image, Kenichi suddenly sees his son now asking the same thing, only he has his father's head on his body. Then the full truth hits him all at once. In the final flashback, we see that Kenichi's father had a rope around him, and Kenichi unknowingly helped his father end his own life. Now that is messed up. The story ends and Yuma notices that Hina is back awake. She starts creeping into the hall, and when Yuma calls to her, her head spins around backwards with black eyes. She says that she needs to make sure the house is nice and tidy before she leaves. Story 89, Natto. Yuma sits at his desk and says, "You're coming back. You're actually gonna come back," and begins crying before telling the 89th story. A woman named Asa talks about a natto shop by her house and how good it's gotten lately. By the way, natto is a traditional Japanese dish made from fermented soybeans. I've never had it, but it doesn't look all that appetizing. Anyway, apparently the natto from the shop is pretty damn good. Having eaten up all of her recent order within a day, Asa heads back to the shop to get more. She knows the old lady who runs the shop by name and asks why it's gotten so good lately. The old woman is vague, but says she changed up her fermenting process recently. She did some research and found an ancient process of making natto. Asa's too curious and asks her what she changed, and the woman shockingly says that she started fermenting the natto with human meat. Asa is obviously flustered, but the woman starts laughing and says she's only joking. Asa's relieved to hear it and grabs her order, though she does notice the fact that the woman is wearing oversized black gloves. It's kinda weird. Later, Asa digs into the beans, and despite the unnerving joke the old woman told, the beans are delicious. Then, Asa bites something hard and pulls a human nail out of her mouth. Well, I just about threw up. Asa rushes back to the shop with the nail in a baggie and tells the woman what she found. The lady apologizes, saying sometimes stuff like this can happen, and offers Asa a replacement batch on the house. The woman then slides off her black gloves, and her hands are fine. She's not missing any fingers or anything, if that's what you were thinking. Asa is relieved and forgives the mistake when she sees all the extra natto the old woman threw in. She heads out, and the woman looks at a picture of her presumably dead husband, saying, "Don't worry, I'll protect the shop no matter what it takes." And now that we can see the woman's full body behind the counter, she's missing a leg, implying Asa's suspicions were true and the woman fermented the natto with her own foot. After the story, Yuma contemplates what Hina said and seems to know that she's going to get rid of his stepmom. Story 90, Letters from a Parent. The chapter opens with Hina tied up on Yuma's bed. He apologizes, but she says she understands. He's only doing this because he has to. Then he begins the next story. A boy named Kokoro sends a letter to his deceased mother asking what happened and saying how lonely he is. He leaves it in a memory book, and later his father discovers the note inside. The next time Kokoro opens it, he finds a letter from his mom. Seems like a nice thing his father did, but when Kokoro shows his father the letter, he gets pissed and rips it up, telling Kokoro to stop with these pranks. The poor kid falls to his knees crying, and this is not the response you'd expect if it really is his father who wrote it. Regardless, the years go by and Kokoro continues to communicate with his dead mom by leaving and finding notes in the memory book. Now that he's older, Kokoro finally realizes it must be his father who wrote the notes. Kokoro gets his college entrance exams in the mail and finds that he's failed. His father finds out and just says that he's too slow for college anyway, and he needs to get a job to support the family. Kokoro throws a tantrum and ends up finding the memory book, which he hadn't looked at in a while. Inside is a note from his mother saying he can do anything he puts his mind to. He just doesn't get it. No matter how much of a drunken mess his father is, he still seems to be writing the notes in the voice of Kokoro's mother. Eventually, on his deathbed, Kokoro's father says he doesn't think he'll be able to write to him from the other side. And Kokoro takes this as his father admitting that he was the one writing the notes. After his death, Kokoro finds a note on his father's memorial shrine that says, "Sorry for all the trouble. Thank you for everything." This causes the kid to break down, wondering why his father never said anything like that while he was still alive. Looking at the memory book one last time, Kokoro finds another letter from his mother, and this time his father couldn't have written it. She mentions that she got Kokoro's letter from when he was little, that asked why she died, but she couldn't answer him at the time, because it's against the rules for ghosts to interfere with the lives of the living. But now she can tell him the truth. She was murdered by his father. The story ends there, and Yuma looks over to see Hina's sleeping body start wiggling around. He holds her body still and says, "Don't hurt her, she's scared too," and begs the entity not to kill Hina. Finally, he says who he believes he's talking to, his mother. At this point, it seems obvious, but the person Yuma's been talking to this whole time is his mother, and he's been telling the 100 stories in hopes of bringing her back as a ghost. Well, it seems like it may be working. Story 91, Poltergeist. Yuma wakes up at his desk and finds his blanket draped over his shoulders. Meanwhile, Hina is clearly cold and curled up on the bed. He walks over and puts the blanket over her before starting the next story. This one starts off pretty crazy, with a man pissing on his father's grave. After this, he walks into the large house that he grew up in. He greets his younger brother and mother, but they seem pretty pissed that he's even here, especially his brother, who yells at him. The man asks if it's really that strange to return home on Obon. This is a sort of traditional Japanese festival to honor ancestral spirits. Anyway, the younger brother says that he hasn't been home in years and that he didn't even show up to dad's funeral. He accuses his older brother of hating their dad and chastises him for reeking of alcohol. The older brother just cheekily says, "Just like dad then, huh?" As the tensions rise, they hear the front door open in the other room, but don't see anyone come inside. There's a loud noise from elsewhere in the house, and they go investigate to find that the bathroom is completely trashed, like someone peed all over the toilet seat. Then several objects start falling and breaking, and the younger son decides that this must be their father's spirit, and he's angry. He believes it's the older brother's fault and tells him to leave. But the older brother says even if he didn't visit home, he always stopped by his father's grave. He then realizes what's happening and starts laughing. We get a flashback to him standing at the father's grave, only now we can see that he wasn't actually pissing on it. He was pouring out sake for his father. So basically their father's ghost didn't show up angry, he just showed up shit-faced. Okay, that's kind of funny. Yuma finishes the story and notices that Hina is gone from the bed, although he calls her mom. And she walks in the room holding a tray of food, telling him dinner's ready. He hugs her tightly and asks her to never leave him again. Story 92. Zashiki Warashi. Yuma and Hina, or should I say Yuma and his mom, are having a great time playing games and eating snacks when she tells him it's time he tells the next story. Sometime decades in the past, a woman walks into a room of a large house and looks disturbed that someone is missing. It then jumps ahead 30 years and we see a large hotel. The lady running the place tells the most senior employee, Takarada, that she'll have to take over for the head of staff since he died under suspicious circumstances. Takarada gladly takes on the responsibility, but is a little thrown off by her first task. She must bring food into a room which all other staff are forbidden from entering. The owner tells her she must always knock before entering and to lock the door behind her immediately. Then she must take off her shoes and place them facing opposite directions. They both do so and move further into the chamber where they see an old doll. The owner announces that they've brought a meal and tells Takarada the final step is to remove yesterday's meal and replace it with a new one. She says that following these instructions is crucial to the fate of the hotel, and hands her the room key. That night, Takarada sneaks over to the room and enters without any food. She places her shoes on the ground, but both facing the same direction, and then, kneeling, says, "Please come home." We hear the sound of tiny footsteps, and then two small feet step into the shoes, and the doll walks out of the room. Takarada smiles, and it seems that this was her plan. The owner is alarmed to see a small child come down the elevator in the middle of the night, and is shocked when she realizes who it really is. The doll then hits her so hard that the woman's head flies off and rolls on the ground. Takarada then says that whenever a Zashiki Warashi leaves their room, in exchange for all the benefits it granted, it takes the life of the owner. She knows this because the woman from 30 years ago was her mother. Their Zashiki Warashi was stolen, and on that day, she died. After all these years, Takarada can finally welcome the doll home. This story is based on the real yokai and translates to Zashiki child, Zashiki being a kind of sitting room. They're believed to bring great fortune to any house they reside in, but are exceedingly rare to actually catch sight of. Anyway, Yuma finishes the story and Hina/his mom starts clapping. He tells her he thinks it's time to stop telling the stories since he's already able to see her, but her face distorts and she yells that that's not allowed. Her face elongates and she says that if he stops, she'll disappear. Only a little longer and this body will be all hers. Story 93. Ghost Photo. Yuma sits looking nervous at his desk while his mom cleans the room. She then asks him to finish the next story and he reluctantly starts it. Two friends are hanging out in a creepy tunnel and take a photo. While reviewing it, they notice what looks like a ghost woman in the background. They both yell and start running, terrified. The next day, they talk on the phone about how creepy it was, and one of the guys asks the other to take a picture of the slides in class for him for note-taking. Class starts, and the man takes a photo of the notes, but when he reviews it, he notices something in the corner. It looks like the ghost woman. Of course, he sees nothing in real life, so he snaps a few more pictures and sees the girl in each one, and she's getting closer. He's terrified and runs out of the class. Then he sends the pictures to his friends, telling him the ghost from yesterday is chasing him. The problem is he can only see it in the photos, so he runs down the hall snapping pictures behind him. His friend then tells him to stop. If the ghost really has been chasing him since yesterday, wouldn't it have caught him by now? He thinks that the ghost can only move toward him when he takes the photos. The friend says he'll head over and hangs up, leaving the man standing terrified in the hallway. He feels blind, and against his better judgment, he takes a couple more pictures where he sees the girl is only feet away from him. Seemingly confirming his friend's theory, he stops taking pictures and heads back to his apartment. He nervously waits for his friend to pick him up and checks his phone, but his password isn't working. He then uses the Face ID, but it doesn't recognize his face. That's because it didn't track his face, but the woman who's now standing right behind him. And she reaches out of the phone itself to choke him. Yuma finishes the story, and the possessed Hina says, "Good, only 7 more to go." Yuma asks her what will happen to Hina, and she says that she'll be fine, she'll go up to heaven. Yuma asks if there's a way that he can save them both, but his mom says it's too late, and reminds him that they made a wish to live happily together again, didn't they? Story 94, I'm Here. Yuma just sits sweating at his desk, and the possessed Hina tells him to get to the story already. It begins with a lost little girl trying to find her way home, and out of reflex she cries for her father to help her. She then looks up to see a man standing and pointing down an alley. It's her father, though she looks surprised to see him, and something's just off here. As she approaches him, he disappears and appears again down the alley, still pointing. This continues until he's guided her all the way home. Her mother was worried sick about her, and the little girl explains that her dad helped her. The mom looks a little disturbed and reminds the girl that her father died a month ago. The girl tries to prove it by showing her mom, but the man is nowhere to be seen. The next day, she's playing at the park when her father appears, pointing toward the house. He successfully guides her home again, and as the girl eats dinner with her mom, the man appears once again. The girl smiles and points him out to her mother, but she clearly doesn't see anything. This time, her father's expression looks different. He seems like he's scared or in pain, and he keeps pointing, eventually guiding the girl to the back porch. There, she finds him outside, pointing at the dirt. It looks like something is buried here. That's the last panel, and I think the implication is that his corpse is under the porch and that the girl's mother killed him. Yuma finishes the story, and his mom starts storming out of the room, saying she realizes how tough this is for him. He's gonna have to decide whether he wants her or Hina more. She tries to leave, but Yuma stops her and falls to his knees, begging her to stay. Story 95. That shrine. Yuma wonders if Hina will be happy in heaven, and his mom, or the spirit claiming to be his mom, says of course she will, it's a wonderful place. She insists he tell the next story. In it, a woman arrives at what's called the Wayside Shrine for babies, and there's a sign posted nearby that says no offerings allowed. The woman prays to the shrine, asking that it grant her and her husband a child soon. She starts to walk away when she hears a small cry. When she turns around, she sees a small statue resembling a baby. She asks if it's hungry and gives it all she has, a small piece of candy. It smiles and stops crying, and the girl takes this as a good omen. She leaves the shrine and runs into an old woman at the bottom of the steps. The woman is surprised to see someone so young here, and the girl says she figures a lot of people would come here to wish for a child. The old lady looks worried and says that she's got it wrong. You wouldn't want a child born from that blessing. Apparently the shrine was built to pay respect to the bitterness and resentment that infants hold. That's because years ago, countless babies were abandoned on this mountain, so their parents would have less mouths to feed. She asks the young woman if she made any offerings and tells her to stay as far away as possible. The girl then runs back to the shrine, thinking she should probably take back that piece of candy. However, as she climbs the steps, she starts feeling really heavy and suddenly pukes all over. At the same time, her stomach starts rapidly expanding as if she was in her 3rd trimester. Even more disturbing, small feet kick violently from inside her belly. She finally makes it back to the statue, and it's gone. Only the candy wrapper remains, and the woman begins hearing the sound of a crying baby coming from her own womb. As Yuma finishes the story, he asks his mom if he could see Hina one more time to properly say goodbye. Story 96, The Perfect Copy. Yuma's mother lays down to sleep and tells him not to talk to Hina longer than he needs to. While he waits for the real Hina to wake back up, he tells the next story. A mad scientist has created a biological 3D printer, the likes of which the world has never seen. After trying to copy an apple with thousands of failed attempts, he finally gets a perfect match. Next, he moves on to animal trials and successfully duplicates clones of them. So now is the final test, to make a perfect human clone. On his first attempt, it seems to work, but his clone is unresponsive. While the body is intact, this is no different than a puppet. The clone speaks, but can only mutter the words, "It hurts," over and over. The scientist doesn't bat an eye at the pain his clone is in, and instead is happy that there does seem to be consciousness. So, like the apples, he tries over and over to get the perfect match. It's pretty disturbing seeing all the bodies pile up in the corner and begin to rot. Finally, he makes a breakthrough with a near-perfect clone that can actually think more complex thoughts. In this case, the clone is crying out in pain as the scientist looks at its internal organs. Like usual, he shows zero empathy and just laughs at the clone. He does one last attempt, and this time he's sure that it'll finally work. He gets into the cloning pod and successfully makes another copy. However, this time, his pod won't open. He's locked in. He then sees his clone exit the other pod and examine him, saying that he's finally made the perfect copy and that this copy even believes he's the original. The scientist denies this. He remembers walking into the pod and initiating the process himself. Well, that's because it really is a perfect match, including memories. So it's kind of a cool way to do this. It switched us to the clone's perspective to simulate how it would feel. From the clone's perspective, he feels no different than the scientist who started the experiment. Well, the original scientist puts his clone down on the operating table and checks out his organs. Of course, the clone cries in agony, but proving that he really is a match this time, he's actually smiling at his own handiwork. Yuma finishes the story and Hina wakes up in bed, the real Hina this time. He tells her that his mom is going to come back and she's happy for him. Then she asks him how, and he just stares at her awkwardly. Story 97. Kokurisan. Yuma tells Hina that his mom is nearly back, and to mark the occasion, he wants to hear one of her stories. The story starts with some kids playing a game of kokuri, similar to something like a Ouija board. The students place their fingers on a coin and see if spirits communicate with them by moving the coin to spell out phrases or answer yes and no. On this occasion, they get no response and give the coin back to the girl who donated it, Shiori. They also tell her she needs to spend it soon or she'll be cursed. A boy named Asama sees it and asks if he can trade her 10 yen for 2 5s. She does the trade and is beat red. That's because Asama is her crush and she finally works up the courage to confess her feelings to him. Afraid of what his answer might be, she tells him not to speak and that he can tell her after they return from winter break. He tries to stop her, but she runs off. After winter vacation, Shiori and the rest of the class are informed that Asama lost his life in a traffic accident. Shiori blames herself. If she let him answer, maybe they would have spent winter vacation as a couple and Asama would still be alive. Some of her classmates argue over whether it would be in poor taste to try another game of kokuri to try and talk to Asama from beyond the grave. Shiori encourages it and joins in. To all of their surprise, this time the coin starts moving and soon Asama answers from the other side. Shiori takes the opportunity to ask if he had feelings for her and he says no. She breaks down crying, but not from disappointment, rather from relief, as now she doesn't feel guilty for his death. Which is kind of messed up because she gave him the cursed coin that likely got him killed. An interesting angle on this is you could look at it as if there's no supernatural elements at all. Like minigames of this nature, all it takes is for one person to move the coin even subconsciously to give the spooky effect. What if Shiori moved the coin subconsciously in order to relieve her own guilt over the situation? Anyway, Hina ends the story and tells Yuma that she actually met his mom before she died. One time at a school event, Hina was feeling really sick and Yuma's mother noticed and spoke up for her, even escorting her to the nurse's office. Hina never got a chance to thank her, but is happy that soon she might be able to. Yuma looks guilty as hell, knowing full well that Hina won't be around to do that. Story 98. Ghost marriage. Hina's back to being possessed and asks Yuma if he's done with his goodbyes and if Hina suspected anything. Yuma assures her Hina had no idea and they move on to the next story. A man's trying to get into his apartment when his ex-girlfriend Kyoko comes up behind him. I guess she's become sort of a stalker and says that if he won't marry her, then they'll just have a ghost marriage, whatever that means. The man just ignores her until he notices she's holding a knife. The man takes action and tries to grab the knife from her hands, and in the struggle, it slices right through Kyoko's neck. He calls the police and luckily isn't charged with anything because a security camera caught the whole thing, making it clear that this was self-defense. One day while checking his mail, the guy sees a red letter from Kyoko. Inside is a photo of Kyoko in traditional bridal wear as well as a lock of her hair. Freaked out, the man starts researching ghost marriages and learns that a woman can put her photo and hair into an envelope, and after death, if a man opens it, he enters into a ghost marriage. He starts realizing that this was her plan all along as Kyoko was smiling when she died. The man then burns the photo and her hair on the stove, but someone rings the doorbell. It turns out to be Kyoko's family, who are congratulating him on the marriage. After the story, Yuma asks his mother if she can return Hina's body to her house for one day. That way she can see her mother one last time before she dies. Then she can come back here and they can celebrate the 100th story together. Story 99. Hanako-san of the toilet. Yuma wonders why his mom hasn't left yet, and she says that she wanted to hear the 99th story before she brought Hina back to her house for the day. The story follows a girl named Kaori who keeps knocking on the bathroom stall door calling for Hanako-san to come out and play. This is another real-life urban legend about a girl who haunts bathrooms in Japan. Kaori enters the stall and begs Hanako to return her big sister to her. Later, some classmates ask her why she keeps going to the third floor bathroom by herself. She explains that her sister and best friend died suddenly one day in the third floor bathroom. Kaori believes she was dragged in by Hanako, and her classmates just make fun of her for believing such a childish story. Later, Kaori returns to the bathroom, this time with a rope, hoping to pull her sister out of the toilet. Suddenly, there's a loud banging on the stall door, scaring the crap out of her, but of course this was only her classmates messing with her. Feeling a little silly, Kaori starts to leave, but the rope in her hand goes taut, as if someone has grabbed the end of it. She starts pulling it until she actually sees a small hand holding the other side in the drain. But she loses her grip and drops the rope, which is pulled down the toilet. Determined to save her sister, Kaori arrives the next day with even longer rope. Walking through the hall, she overhears her classmates making fun of her. They looked into it, and the real story is that Kaori's sister apparently took her own life after being bullied so much. They feel bad for making fun of her now, assuming she just can't accept her sister's death. Kaori returns to the toilet regardless and once again lowers the rope down the drain. A hand grabs on and starts pulling the rope. This time they make it arm's length out of the toilet and actually grab Kaori's hair. They're not trying to get out, they're trying to pull her in. Just then, another set of hands reaches out and stops the first pair, pulling them both down into the toilet. In the end, it seems Hanako was trying to pull Kaori in and her sister saved her. Once Kaori realizes this, she can't help but reach out again for her sister, and on the final panel, we just hear strange sounds coming from the toilet, and the girl is nowhere to be seen. Yuma ends it, and his mom heads off to Hina's, saying she's excited for the last story tomorrow. After she leaves, Yuma sits at his desk and seems to grab the photo as the screen goes black. There's sounds of a struggle, and we hear Yuma thanking Hina before even more disturbing noises. Story 100. Mom. This chapter starts with a fuzzy black screen. We see a figure asking if anyone can hear them, and then they begin a story. This story is about a boy named Yuma. He wakes up in the middle of the night scared and asks his mom if he can sleep with her. She's beautiful and kind and happily lets him jump in the bed. As he lays down, his mother tells him not to be afraid. Actually, she keeps repeating this phrase and slowly wraps her hand around his neck. Yuma wakes up in a cold sweat. This was only a dream or nightmare. He looks over at his desk to see a framed picture of his mom. Yeah, at this point it was obvious, but the entire time Yuma was talking to a photo of his mother, and we were seeing through the perspective of the frame. Yuma clutches it in his arms and cries when his father and stepmom come into the room. It's kind of weird seeing them as normal people instead of scary entities standing at the edge of the room. His father yells at him for continuing to cry about his mother's death and punches the poor kid in the stomach. He then stomps Yuma on the ground while his stepmom laughs, in case he didn't hate these people enough. Yuma just covers his head and looks up at the photo of his mom when there's an eerie sound from somewhere in the house, causing his dad to leave. Yuma can't help but feel like this wasn't a coincidence and that his mom was looking out for him. After this incident, Yuma dedicated all his time to researching the afterlife and the underworld. While he studies at the library, he runs into a girl named Hina from his class. She properly introduces herself and notices his interest in ghosts. Yuma says he just wants to know if his mom is still nearby. He says that if his mom is still worried about him, she may be stuck in the underworld, so he has to hurry and save her. It jumps ahead to that fateful day when Yuma stares out the third floor window of the school ready to jump. Of course, Hina stops him, and this time we get a deeper look at the conversation that started everything. Hina says doing this would only bring Yuma's mom more sadness. She grabs him by the hand and tells him there's a way he can see his mom again without dying. She asks if he knows about the 100 ghost stories. So Yuma's been telling the stories all along, hoping to bring his mother back as a ghost. The story ends there, and it's actually Hina who's talking in her own room. She looks completely back to normal with no signs of possession. She says that she really thought Yuma would die if she didn't do anything back then. Unfortunately, things only got worse after that. There's a knock at the door, and Hina's mother says she got a letter. It's from Yuma, and she holds it up so we can see it. He says that when Hina told him about the ghost stories, it gave him hope, but somewhere along the way, he wanted more. He wanted to live together with his mom again, and if Hina died, he would have been able to, but he couldn't bring himself to do it. He thanks her for never making him choose. He's going to heaven to be with his mom now. Goodbye. Hina shivers and starts crying, calling Yuma cruel. Up until the end, he never confided in her and ultimately chose his mom. She just wishes she could have been there to stop him. She says, "I guess there's no holding back now." That puts an end to the first story, and clicks the lights off. And that, my friends, is the 100 ghost stories that will lead to my own death. It looks like in the end, Yuma did end his life in order to see his mother. And now, in order to contact him, Hina has begun her own round of 100 stories, creating a vicious cycle. My guess is that Hina is actually talking to a photo of Yuma, similarly to how he spoke to his mother. I wasn't sure what to expect from the ending, but man, it's a pretty sad way to end it, I have to say. It's kind of sad to see this series end, as I've dedicated hundreds of hours into covering it over the last couple months, but it's really been a blast. As I've said before, it's amazing to me how the author, Anji Matono, was able to come up with so many stories that were all creepy and engaging. Anyway, what did you guys think of the ending, and what were your favorite stories along the way? Let me know in the comments. Shout out to Kill Me Katie as always for the intro and outro music, which is likely playing right now. And if you want to see your art at the end of my videos, email me a submission to the address below with a name or social media handle. But I appreciate you guys watching at all. This is Grief speaking. Goodbye, friends.